I am Ellen Given, and thank you all for coming today. Today is going to be a little bit of a journey in time with words and music. And to make this a little bit less abstract.
Excuse me. Ellen, can you speak up?
Yep, okay. To make this a little bit less abstract, I'm going to use this gold ribbon, this marker. This program starts here, ends there, ends with the reading of Chester County Soliloquy. And the whole program is based on the concept that the events that do, and sometimes more importantly, don't happen in your childhood and adolescence affect how you deal with everything you have to deal with as an adult. So we're going to start with 1948 in Westtown, Pennsylvania, which is the picture which is ghosted on your program. And that's where I grew up. My father built the house there on this beautiful 17-acre estate. However, it starts when I was 18 months, but I didn't find out about this story. I didn't find out about this story until 1982, 83, when my husband and I were just coming off the end of the Broadway tour of Pirates of Penzance with our two children. And it ended up in Wilmington, Delaware, which is close to Westchester, Pennsylvania, where my parents were. And they said, well, final week, why don't we have them there? And then I'll give you a chance, because it was a 5-month tour, 8 shows a week, and I had to be Marnie's tutor, et cetera. And it got them a chance to see their grandchildren for longer, because we were in Massachusetts, they were in Pennsylvania. So I got there to pick them up after a week, and my father is out in the garage, which had just finished, and he said, you think the blueprints would be destroyed, wouldn't you? And I thought he was talking about architecture. And what he was referring to was the fact that my two daughters were up on this level, high level. The one was, and he was walking them across the opening, with board, and the one was tentatively going, and the other one was walking like a dancer, which she's trained. And he told me the story of when I must have been 18 months old. We had just moved into this house in Westtown. Somehow I got outside. I heard him up on the roof, talking to the other one. He was finishing on the roof. I wanted to see what he was doing. You've heard of early readers and early walkers. I guess I was an early climber. So I climbed up this scaffolding, which is by the chimney, cement, where the well underneath, to see what he was doing. And he sees my eyes over the... I had never heard this. And I said, what did you do? He said, I started talking to you. I came over, I brought you down. I said, what did you say to Mom? He said, I never told her. I said, but you must have said something to her. And he said, yeah, keep an eye on this one, she's a climber. And I'm so thankful that that's what he said, because otherwise, would have kept me in the playpen until I was 18 or something, And so I'm going to use this phrase, it could have gone a different way, That's one instance. So, because I did not fall, because I would not have survived the fall, all these other events could take place. So, we are going to start today with Bach. all of Bach is not, that's one of my favorite composers, but all of Bach is not so slow and serious, so you might have this also. I'm going to go right now to the year 1968, which was a very, very, very eventful year for me. So we're going to go here to where this would be, back a little bit, 68. All right, 68 was a very, very tumultuous year. It was the Vietnam War, which I was very much opposed to. It was my senior year in college and music school. Started out with having completed the electronic music course in Philadelphia at PMA, where I went to school, where I was the only non-composition major in it, the only female. It was a tiny little room in the conservatory annex over on 20th Street, and it was the Moog synthesizer. So it was all analog, not digital. The chords kept falling on the floor. That was the first semester course. That ended in January. Then in January, I did all the solo flute work in Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde, which we did with Maureen Forrester. And that was just such a magical event. That was January. Then April 4th, we went in composition seminar to the Met, and on the way to the electronic music studio in Princeton, where I saw Flute being a sine wave, and on to the Met to do a review of Finistera's Beaumarchal, an opera. So this was the evening of April 4th, right at the end of the program. The people that we went by bus said, Martin Luther King Jr. has been shot. They did not say killed. They said, there's unrest, there's rioting in the streets. You've got to go directly to the buses. Do not establish eye contact. Now, I had met MLK Jr. in my freshman year at school. We did the Beethoven's Ninth, and it was a convention hall, University of Pennsylvania, and he was the keynote speaker. And security was totally different in those days. And we had to keep our instrument cases off stage, which is where he ended up standing. Clarinet player said, "Hey, you want to come meet MLK, something you can tell your grandchildren about." And so we talked with him, and he was so down to earth and so friendly, and the other soloists were strutting around very importantly, and he was laid back like a jazz player, very relaxed and friendly, and he really loved the music. And he said, "Y'all make beautiful music. That was mighty fine, mighty fine." And now he was gone. That was April 4th now. The 30th, I gave my senior recital, which was very important, and I got a good tape of that. Graduated in June. The day I graduated, Bobby Kennedy died. Bobby Kennedy was shot, and it was like, why are all the good people being killed? And I didn't even want to go to the graduation. All right, then I graduated, and I found out about a job, an opening, in the Atlantic Symphony in Halifax, Nova Scotia, forming of a new orchestra. And I only had my senior recital tape and my resume, and I sent it to them, and I got the job. And they had a mail strike in the Maritimes at the end of August, and they said, we've accepted you for this position, flute and piccolo, and send us a telegram that you have accepted the job, which I did. There was only one problem. I didn't have a piccolo. So everybody said, go to Hans Menig. He makes them, and he did all the repair for all the Philadelphia Orchestra wind players. So I called him, made an appointment, went in to see him. I told him what I needed. This was August 17th of 68. And I don't know if you remember, 1968 was a very hot year. And in Philadelphia that day, it was very hot. And I've got these 3 piccolos that he had set out for me to try. And I was sweating, my lip was sweating, my brow, and he pulls out his handkerchief and offers me his handkerchief. And it was just very symbolic to me of an age gone by. And I said, this one. He said, that's the one I would have chosen too. We shook hands, and he wished me well on my career. Then I had to get up there. My brother and sister and my parents were at the airport flying up. I remember seeing them in the distance, and my sister's, it was 15 and a half at the time. She says, Ellen's leaving us. She's flying up to Canada. We're never going to see her again. That wasn't true, but I did not live in Pennsylvania from that moment on. So I get up to Halifax. The personnel manager picks the ones of us from Philadelphia that were on the same flight, took us to the hotel. We had to find a place to live. I found a place to live. Part of the orchestra contract was a weekly taping on the CBC for a radio broadcast, 1 4-hour rehearsal and taping. You didn't know what the music was going to be. You go in, it was on Gottingen Street. You go up, they shut the door, the red light goes on, you rehearse the music, and you tape it. Okay. This was like 3 weeks into the season with my new piccolo. First thing we get, second movement, Bartók, dances. It's all piccolo, solo, and strings. And this, again, is still the old days, not like they can splice stuff in like they do now, but someone made a mistake that they couldn't overlook. They'd have to start all the way back at the beginning. So the pressure's on. We do the first movement. Then we come to the second movement. I got through it in one take. Musicians tap their bow. Then we get to the next movement, and the horns started making a mistake. goes into the booth. Got to do it again. Comes out. Then a different horn player makes a mistake. And this conductor did not speak much English. He was from Koblenz, and he gets this scowl on his face. It goes in, and then he comes out, and he says, "Do it like piccolo," meaning one take. The next take, they did it. So Bartók has always been an important composer to me, and I would like to play certain pieces from his Suite Paysanne Hongrois. So, let me get this next one set up here. In what year was it? 1988, I got my first commission to compose a piece, and it was from Old South Church in Boston, and it was to do the background music to Admiral Crichton. And so when you get a commission, the object is to accomplish the task at hand. What do you do? How do you fit it into the period, the instrumentation, the style to achieve the goal of instrumental music for this? So the first thing you have to do is read the play, which was by J.M. Barrie, who wrote Peter Pan. So I figured the budget was very low, so I figured I would score it for my Trio Desjardins, which is flute, violin, and cello, and that we would record it, and then they could use that recording because they could never have us playing live for each of the performances. So I got permission to, I read the play, I decided what I was going to do with it, I got it ready, and I got permission to park in the alley in back of Old South because I had to bring my recording equipment with me. And he said, the minister said, Jim Crawford said, come in the alley, but you have to get out the same way you come in. It's only half a block alley. And there's 3 parking places. If none of them are there, park the closest to the back door, ring the bell, you can bring your stuff in through that entrance, so you don't have to carry it through the street. So I did that. We went in, we set up, they sight read it, we recorded it, and the actor that was playing Admiral Crichton was there, and he noticed, so he was, interested in that part especially, and I gave Crichton a Schweppesy little waltz, because it's basically a comedy, but I put it in G minor. And he said, why would you have put it in G minor? And I said, because it was showing J.M. Barrie's thoughts on the aristocracy in England and the class system, and he didn't agree with everybody at the top having everything and no one else having anything. So I put it in G minor. And he said, I never thought of it that way. And then he told me later that he sang the role a little bit differently because of that. All right, so this was great. So we're finished, we pack up, I get out, I come back out the same way I went in, and I've got to get home. I've got to get back to Sudbury and then take my daughter to West Concord for her dance lessons. And so this is in the 73 Super Beetle. And when I went out, there were 3 cars there. There were 2 more cars there. So this is going to be tight getting out of here. So I try to back up, and there's a dumpster in back of me, and I wasn't going to make it. I said, okay, I'm almost there if I just sort of ram it pretty fast, but I have to go over. There was a cardboard box, strangely sort of propped up against the bottom of the dumpster. And something made me just get out of the car, not try to get out fast. And I picked up, and there was a homeless person that was lying right under the box. I definitely would have driven right over him. And it was frightening. And, he was, your instincts are to give him something to eat. I didn't have time to do that. Or give him some money to get something to eat. He might have bought alcohol or drugs with that. And there's a very high percentage that, many of the, not all, but many of the homeless people have mental illness. And if you touch someone with schizophrenia, if you can touch them, you can get a very alarming result. So I didn't want to touch him, but I wanted to help him. I wanted to get rid of the box, and I had to get out of there. I think I went back into the church and asked the minister if they could move the other 2 cars. He did get up, and I did put the cardboard box over by the wall. And when we came out, he was gone. But it's another example of something that could have, after all this, getting this commission done successfully, could have gone the other way. Just the way that the climb on the scaffolding could have gone the other way. And there was one more incident could have gone the other way, very major incident. My trio we played weddings, we played receptions, we played art openings, we played businesses. I used to get permission to go to the medical meetings when we would play for medical conferences because of my interest in medicine. And so we played, I don't know if you've ever had any radiology work done, but the American College of Radiology is a business in Reston, Virginia. We played for them twice. They honor radiologists for that year, and they travel all over the world with where they hold this convention. So we were in the Hilton in New York City in 2000, and it was the end of September, so my guys couldn't do it, so they were doing the ballet, so I had to get subs from my friends from New York to play. They loved the music, and they said, oh, you should play for us next year. We're going to be in San Francisco. It's going to be a little bit earlier, not in late September. And I got this huge roar in my head and this ridiculous feeling of tons of concrete and that you could not escape from. And I just said, oh yeah, there's a lot of similarities between Boston and San Francisco, and I let it go, and I said, I should not pursue this job. I should not stay in contact with the personnel woman, which I did not, and really could have gone the other way, because if I had, myself and the other two members of the trio would have been on one of the planes that flew into the towers, because those planes were going to New York, and we would have been going out, those planes were going to California, and we would have been flying out to California on one of those planes. It's incredible how circumstances can change. That was probably the single most decisive, could have gone the other way story. So, but they aren't all tragic stories like this. In those years, the only thing that I did for myself was play soccer, women's soccer. We had a women's soccer team in Sudbury, and I was one of the original 7 members. It was an over 30 league. Most of us had kids, and they grew up as we were playing. I played for about 25 years there. So I'm freelancing, I'm taking care of the kids, I'm, cutting the grass, doing the whole bit. And most jobs, most weddings were on Saturdays or Sundays. Soccer games are always on Sundays. So you can go from the job to the soccer game, but you can't go from a soccer game to the job. So I had a flute-alone wedding at the chapel, the Wayside Inn, and then a flute-alone reception, but it was right down the street, right down the road from Haskell Field, where the home game was. I said, oh, okay, I can do this. So, all right, play the wedding, pack up, get to the place, play the reception. Well, we've played some very fancy things, very ritzy government things and whatever, museums. This was not one of those jobs. This was like trying to play a reception in a locker room. So I'm sitting there, the tables are all around, and I'm like a couple feet away from the ladies' room where I'm going to have to go in and change into my soccer stuff after I'm done. And the door, creak, slam, the door, where's the WD-40? This door kept slamming. And so there was a woman sitting at the table. Most of the chairs around her were empty. She was drinking all the wine that was brought to the table. She was laughing and hooting, and I just thought, that's great, she's having a good time, but I hope she's not driving. All right, so I get done with the job, I pack up, go into the ladies' room, and within about 2 minutes, I'm into the uniform with the whole bit, the shin guards and everything, and put the soccer shoes on the sink, and I go over to pick up the rest of my stuff, and the long gown's hanging there, and I hear the door open, and then I don't hear it close. And then I hear it open again, and it came over, and it was guzzling Gertie, and she was like staggering into the ladies' room, and I knew exactly what happened. She had had so much to drink that when she saw the soccer shoes on the sink, she thought she had walked into the men's room. So, long story short is that she's swaying in the breeze, and I can't get by her, and I'm trying to get to my game. She says, oh, you have a... She didn't know it was me that had played. And then she sees the dress. say, are you the same one that was just, and I said, yes. I said I was. I'm the flutist that was playing, but now I have a soccer game. Oh, your son has a soccer game. I said, no, I don't have any sons. I have 2 daughters. I'm playing the game. Oh, and she's swinging the reason, and I can't get by her. Put this woman on, put her on defense, And so I just gently took her and I said, yes, but that was then and this is now. And I just sort of leaned her against the wall and went out and played. So, I mean, it has its light moments. And you also have lighter moments with the music that you play. So you might be playing a jazz piece, like to do a little bit of the Claude Bowling jazz suite. First is Baroque and Blue, and then Javanese. nominees. So now we are going to go just quickly to 1963. You can imagine where that would be over there. The summer of 1963. It's going into my senior year in high school. Now, when we lived in Westtown, my father built the house there, but we did not own the property. So when there youngest daughter got married, the people that owned the property, they sold the property, and we had to move, which was heartbreaking to me because it was so incredible to grow up there. And I said, I'm staying here, you guys go. And they said, no, we have to go. So I thought, and when I was there, I had taken care of a person's horse there. And at the time, because I was always around animals, I was always with my father for all the trips that we would do to get the chicks, to get the chickens, in the incubator, and 100 chicks. And I would say, like, are all these chicks from Rhode Island, And he said, why do you ask? And I said, well, because I knew they were Rhode Island Reds. And I said, we live in Pennsylvania. Why don't we have Pennsylvania Reds? He said, I'll look into it for you. And he got the journal from Harrisburg of all the breeds of chickens in the Eastern Seaboard in the last 20 years, But he was a great influence to me, and I was always around him, always around animals. And when we moved, I thought I'll never get a horse. And I had taken care of this person's horse who lived and went to school, Westtown School, which was about half a mile away, big, very important Quaker school. But I did. When I was 15, when we moved then to the north side of Westchester, I did get a horse. And it's a long story, I won't go into all that, but he was 3 years old, he was very strong. I was 15, and I was also strong. I was an experienced rider, but I brought him home, and it was mid-October of that year. And it was a Saturday. Sunday was the first chance to ride him in an open field. All right, there was only one open field that I knew of in that area. And we went up there, very, no problem. We get to the field, and this is my first time. And he hadn't been ridden that much, by the way. So we start. It was a very open field, wasn't planted. However, on one side it had a dip called a kettle that you wouldn't want to go near, and on the way edge was Route 100, which was a major transportation route. Trucks, cars, no barrier, no nothing. The field went right into it. So we start, and we start at a trot. Pretty soon, he's broken into a canter. Next thing you know, he's in a full gallop, and then he's in a dead run. And I'm thinking, this horse is running away with me. And so what do? Your brain is working all the alternatives. You can't jump off. You could get trampled. He could break his neck. You got to stay on, but I can't. With all my strength, I could not slow him down. I could not stop him. And I knew that if he kept going at that rate of speed, sooner than later, we were going to be coming right into Route 100 with, what are the chances that no car is going to be there, with a not a good recovery area on the other side of Route 100 either. And I remembered reading that if you're ever in this situation, you'll never control the beast by your strength, because the horse is stronger than you are, that you can take the rein and put it under one leg and try to get him in circles. And that's what I did. And I took the left rein and put it under my left leg. And so he's still running at this, and there was a kid, his mother was hanging up clothes, and people hung up their clothes in the clotheslines in those days. They were outside, Mom, look how fast that horse is going. Yeah, tell me about it, kid. And I'm getting closer and closer to Route 100. We are, and he's going this way. He's going almost sideways with his head, and I've got the rein under here. I've got to stay on so I don't. And it was only a snaffle bit, which is a smaller, less strong bit than a curb bit. There were no martingales. It was just me and the reins and the horse. And we get right up to Route 20, and I got him stopped. And I jumped off, and he's stammering and. Could have been the end right there. Could have been the end right there. And I put my face up by he was probably just as nervous about this as I was. And I got back on him, and I said, Caper, I named him Caper. it's not going to be this way. I got back on him, walked back to the place way down where we started, and I said, let's do this again. And I kept him at a trot all the way around. Now, and I went home. I didn't tell anybody about this. I didn't tell my parent. My mom would have been panicking, you know. Oh, it's too dangerous. So it was the night of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And the next morning in homeroom, my friend said, did you see Kennedy on TV last night? Did you hear how he was backing down Khrushchev? Did you hear? Were you scared? And I said, yes, I saw it. No, I wasn't scared. I had enough problems of my own. So that was a case where, you know, here I finally got my dream of having the horse, and it was almost the end. Okay, so I had him for 3 seasons. Then in the summer of '63, I was at a workshop where they had the first flutist of the Philadelphia Orchestra, Mary Panitz, come in and demonstrate the flute. And he was fulfilling the first chair position, which was held by William Kincaid, which was my first concept of flute playing, the legendary William Kincaid, who was forced to retire, and that never works for a musician when you're forced to retire. So here was Panitz, and he played this piece, and it just blew me away. And I said, I should try to study with this person. And so I got it arranged that I was able to study with him. That meant going to Cherry Hill, New Jersey every Saturday, and I thought, I've got to sell caper. And I found, which I did not want to do, and I found a family with 2 daughters, and I said, just promise me that you'll take good care of them and that you'll ride them a lot. So they came, and they lived in Westtown, ironically, and loaded him into their truck. He was calm. He didn't know what was happening. So I was like 17 now. And loaded him into their trailer, and it pulled out down the driveway. And he got halfway down the driveway, and he whinnied. And the sound went all over the valley, and I can still hear that sound. And then when he got to the end of the driveway, he whinnied again, like, why are you selling me? Why? Why? So this piece that I'm going to play now is the piece that Panitz played, and it represents my decision that I was definitely not going to go into veterinary medicine, and that I was going to be a professional musician. I'm going to play two sections of it. I don't know if we have enough time. I might just play one, we'll see. Bergère Captive. I think for time, I'm just going to play the one. Thank you. Thank you. Now, Elvis has not left the building yet, so I now would like to do the reading of Chester County Soliloquy, and I do want to get this flute put away. Does anybody have any questions while I'm getting the water out of this or anything? I'll just do this quickly. There's a lot of, French literature for the flute, for sure. The reading of Chester County Soliloquy, which I can't believe I wrote 40 years ago, but I did, was what I gave to my father for his 73rd birthday, to thank him for the incredible childhood that we had, which was largely because of his decision to build this house and have us grow up there. And I'm just going to tell you one story before I read it, which is the incident which really signifies my father's humanitarian qualities. It was December of 1955. I was 9 years old. It was a very, very cold winter in Pennsylvania. There was snow cover, the ponds were frozen. It was, wind, everything. It was Saturday night. It was decided that we might lose the power. We may or may not get to church the next morning, which we always did every week, and that we should just go to bed, Now, I'll find this. So my bedroom was upstairs. My parents went to bed. My brother was upstairs, his bedroom. But again, something said something to me, and I thought, something's not right. I couldn't get to sleep. So I looked out the window upstairs. It's a snowstorm. Okay, so that's good. Still thought that there was danger. Some animals or people might be in danger. So I get up, and I don't turn on any lights. And, my father had built this house, so my hands knew the graduated balusters on the stairway. My feet knew the oak treads. I go downstairs, and I go to the window, the only west-looking window, which has a complete exposure to the meadow and the valley below. And my mother's piano, she didn't have her Steinway yet. This was a Baldwin Acrosonic, so it's a smaller piano. I remember putting my knees up on the piano bench and just sort of instinctively looking out the window. And this is like maybe 11 o'clock now at night. And I see this light in this horizon that has no reason for being there. And I look at it again, and I realize that's the Bartram's barn. It's on fire. So I go running into my parents' bedroom, and I said, "You've got to come see. Bartram's barn is on fire." And my mother says, "What?" And my father came in. I said, "The barn, it's burning." And he comes in the living room, and he looks at it, and in a flash, he goes back in and he gets dressed into wool, the whole coat, everything. Goes down to the cellar, gets a backpack, brings up an axe with a leather cover that he had made, rope, and these big, like deep-sea fishing boots, and puts them in the backpack. Of course, my mother is pleading with him not to go. She says, "Harvey, let the fire people take care of it. You don't have to go." And, my mom grew up in the city. She was a city girl. She had 4 generations of florists, of business people. My father grew up in Lancaster County. He had 400 years almost of farmers there. And when you grow up in the country like that, the able-bodied farmers are the fire department. And anybody that is able-bodied goes, and if there's a fire, they ring a certain bell. They ring a certain number of rings to designate where the fire is, because in those early, I'm talking about the early days, there were not before telephones even. And even later, a lot of these farms didn't have telephones. So she's still wrangling with him not to go in her mind, you know, and I'm there watching this, and he finally looked at her very sternly, and I'll never forget. He said, "Yes, I do have to go. They need all the help they can get." And so he pries open the door, goes out in the meadow, which she's had to go over the fence. You know, there's always barbed wire on the exterior fences, which keep your animals in, the other guy's animals out. Down through the orchard, down across to deal with this fire. And my mother said, "Okay, you gotta go back to bed." I said, no, I refused. I went back to the piano. I said, "I'll go, I'm just gonna watch a little bit." So I go over. Now, I knew that even at that early age that, you know, my father was very experienced. He had rescued horses and people from floods and fires. He had climbed hiked most of the Appalachian Trail. He went over the knife edge with he was a scoutmaster, world-renowned scoutmaster, for the Eagle Badge, climbing over the Mount Katahdin, the knife edge at Mount Katahdin, and almost into its 70s. This was later. And I knew that he wasn't going to come back until that fire was secured and that everyone was safe, and that in the process it was going to be exposed. It was so cold and so windy. And he wasn't going to get a ride back. He was going to have to walk back up. The end result was that they lost the barn, they lost their hay, they lost their equipment, but they lost no animals and no one lost their life. And my father was very instrumental in helping the fire not get closer to the houses where the people lived, which were close to the barn. This was, as I say, I was only 9, and my father repeatedly showed me by example what it's like to put yourself to be a humanitarian and put yourself in danger, which is what the fire people do all the time. Every time they go out, they have to go. But the story doesn't quite end there. They had a younger daughter, Sally, and she was just actually a few years younger than I was. And I think what happened, and I only figured this out later, I think what happened is that he must have told the Bartrams that it was his daughter, me, who had alerted them to the fire, because I came down and saw it from the only place where you could see it at that time, and if I hadn't, they would have missed it entirely. And when I was about 18, we got a phone call, and it was the Bartrams, and she said, "Sally's taken up the flute, and there's only one person she wants to study with, and it's Ellen. Will you take her on as a flute student?" So I said yes. And so they wanted to keep the connection. And just a couple weeks ago, I found the manuscript book that I had started for her, of Sally Bartram, in Bartram's Lane. Now, I still have it. Somehow I ended up with it. So she would be in her 70s now. So this piece started, the Chester County Soliloquy, started as my attempts to design a bell, which I'm still working on. And in the course of doing that, you know, it was because I was hearing a sound in my head, and I was trying to design a bell that would accommodate that sound from an instrument that didn't exist yet. And I figured out it was the bell of the soccer games at Westtown School, which was about at least a half a mile away, maybe more. We got to the point, I took it to my idea, a sketch to a metallurgist at MIT, and he said, "Whatever you do, you have to make a model." So we went with my dad. He came up from Pennsylvania, and we went to the factory in Canton where they make crotales. I mean, they can't let you in watching any of the formula or anything for the symbols, but it's, you know, I never got to making the bell. But I started writing down all these impressions of sounds that led to Chester County Soliloquy. So when you create a piece, no matter what medium you're working in, whatever you are, whatever if you're a musician or an artist or whatever, a poet, it satisfies it accomplishes two things, hopefully two things. One is that it releases the idea wheels that cause you to need to create this in the first place. And there must be a need to create gene. They haven't really pinned that one down, but I'm sure there is. It's not like you want to just maybe write this thing, you have to write it. But the second thing is that what you create sometimes can help people. So I sent it to my parents, and they loved it. And they sent it to my cousins on my mom's side. But he sent it to his sister, Noreen. And when she read it, it gave her the confidence to write her life story, in which she talked about a very traumatic incident that nobody knew about. And she was in her 60s then. And then she became, it was a burden released from her. She wrote it, sent it to my father, and then I read it. And I stayed in touch with her by phone. She was in an assisted living in Lidditz, Pennsylvania, for the next 20, 30 years, whatever it was, sharp as a bell. And I would ask her questions about the ancestry and the people. And she passed away this past November 7th, and she was 105 years old. So this reading is for her. Chester County Soliloquy. I will remember it as it was, before the grandchildren come running, throwing out recollections of saltwater taffy pastels, bluebirds in the meadow, and of willows swaying in the seductive innocence of childhooded summers. Back to the time of clearly defined seasons, never a snowless Christmas or a springless year, so lacking in romance. Of serpentine houses built in the 1700s, homesteads that bound several generations under one roof, farm families working closely with nature and each other. The gingham ladies, the farmers' wives, were plump and made preserves and square danced in the Grange Hall on Saturday nights, their partners promenading in sun-swathed skin, reaching out with work-worn hands upon close inspection to be missing fingers, claimed by combines and reapers. Domesticated daughters and land-broken sons born into the agricultural quilt perpetuated the pattern. Indian trails that wound around these farmlands evolved into roads designed for the foot, not the wheel. The hills I knew were not far from Andrew Wyeth's territory, draped in January light, with ribbons of Ichabod Crane valleys so deep you were lost in the quagmire of your own thoughts. Trees were friends whose personalities were revealed in the language of stance. I was perplexed by a writhing pear tree in back of the chicken house, which appeared to be burdened by the witness of death of the older hens. The horrible, decisive blow in the axe in my father's hands was a totally incongruous act with his gentle nature. Why do we have to kill them, I would ask. Why can't we just keep them? Well, he would answer calmly, it's all part of it. An edge in the air, a scrunch underfoot of scarlet gold and burnt sienna, soon to amber down to somber gray. Sweet applewood fires crackling in the lowering of October nights, acres of orchards captured in frost. Fall unraveled into late November as a thin, scattered blanket shivering over childless Thanksgiving ground, awaiting insulation, anticipating the vast snow dancers of winter, swirling and swirling through the darkness, masking the magnacity of the moon. The snows came from an ancient sky, like the crescendo of an approaching fox hunt, swiftly descending, interpreting the land in monochromatic nocturnal lavender, or in daylight by prismatic crystals, sculpturing blizzards that challenged even the most self-reliant. My brother, sister, and I spent many hours on our wooden sleds, constructing complicated runs over crystalline banks, interlacing meadow fences, flying past holly bushes, catatonic in their conversation. Spring held promises of miniature boats smothered in dandelions, sent to distant sides of the pond, unreachable if they docked near muskrat traps, of butterflies wafting on lilac clouds, forsythia in varied intensities of yellow, dogwood trees smiling delicately at their less refined neighbors, exuberant streams with beaver dams, Easter pansies in paper pots, Sunday school spilling out on the back seat shelf. Lured by the abode of the birds, I listened from my serene stonewall perch as the fields awoke, deep grasses of moisture glistening in an intricate web of dawn. In the warm light of buttercup season, the meadows and woods published their new ideas with help in distribution from the birds and the wind. Endless enchantment was presented to a young child growing up in the changing texture and soundscape of nature. As the days ended, the earth seemed to breathe more slowly, suspending the minutes as if to wait for the sun to settle into a hidden chosen spot beyond the horizon. But the real spokesman for the universe, the most profound voice that nature has to offer, is silence. When you are a child, silence takes its time because it knows that as a child, you can have the supreme joy of noticing its existence without being aware that you have noticed it. In contrast to the familiarity of the house we lived in, which my father built, was the aura of the mansion on the estate. It stood in foreboding majesty. 3 floors and a mansard roof, ivy-covered walls keeping the secrets of the house, private school suitcases, carpets throughout, a slice of wealth managed by the matron with martini eyes, trim in her custom clothes, appointment book in hand, organizing the day, confirming details. I remember the beauty, the mysterious beauty of their Christmas tree with all blue lights, reflecting softly on the oil portraits showcased in the living room, a proud display of their sophisticated daughters. I sensed a respect for perfection and a power of acquisition, or so it appeared, for whatever one wanted. On the few occasions of my being inside the house, it seemed as though I had just entered upon an elegant chess game, with all the royally appropriate moves being carefully made. There was humor, gratitude, and an air of decorum. Always so well dressed that I almost wondered if they slept with their shoes on to be ready to greet each day properly. At the end of the day, around 6 o'clock, the owner of the property, husband of the woman with martini eyes, returned. I watched the white walls come down the long driveway, slowly bringing him from the train station. Having had time to ponder, his best decisions were made, perhaps, on the daily journey to and from Philadelphia. His car would come to rest in the 3-car garage of the barn, next to the tack room with the splendor of saddles and bridles. There was a cut-down silo adjoining the barn, with a dungeon door entrance nestled into the hill, with a narrow connecting tunnel into the hayloft, always entrenched in cobwebs. The spring house was one of my favorite magical spots. It was kept locked. It had a fireplace, mallard decoys on the mantel, and tin plates and pewter mugs on the open shelves. An alcove contained long Anderson windows, Venetian blinds, and a black 40s vintage wall telephone. As I understood it, this was fancy for a spring house. The Aldrich Family, a syndicated radio show by Clifford Goldsmith. Henry, coming mother. DeHaven's drugstore and many Westchester names were incorporated into Henry's adventures. It was written right here in the spring house, which Goldsmith called his brown study, my mother explained. He owned this property before we moved here. The weather vanes on the barn bore the name Goldsmith. He wrote the script here and went to New York City once a week, every Wednesday, for the regular Wednesday broadcast. It didn't matter to me that this was a literary spring house. That was something adults got excited about. When you're 3 years old, a house can be magical, not because it's famous or fancy, but simply because it is there. Horses were of great significance in the network of estate families. Double martingale temperaments snorted and stomped in their stalls and sprang into the open meadow with theatrical flair. For hunt or for show, they were handled with skill and affection. Ribbons and trophies overflowed as the horse people measured their lives by their stirrup leathers. In the summer, there were parties, champagne dancing in a nice swan, spilling down into the rose garden, an impeccably terraced wonderland below the wishing well by the barn. There was laughter from the valley, reaching up and hugging the enchantment of the August air, trying to put away the remnants of war and bring on the children. And on a simple, quiet summer eve, the gypsy caretakers, happy yet mournful as doves, stood by the spring house, singing a serenade of the soul over the lilies and into the sunset. I watched silently, absorbing the power and the mood of the late 1940s, but I was a child, not knowing what that was. Later, I could see the juxtaposition of different worlds, how the hands filled with soil needed the white-gloved hand, and conversely, even though their paths never appeared to cross. I will remember the years at Bluebird Meadow in Westtown as they were, before the memory fades into time, before it is gone, like the distant cry of a church bell, muted through the night, ringing like a lingering death. Before another and another generation come running, and in a brief expanse of time, see it all themselves in the jewel of their own soliloquy. Thank you.